Hey. This is Noah Lee back at it again, and this is Papa Rob.
Yeah, Rob Miller.
Rob Miller.
Papa.
Papa.
Yep.
Papa Rob's copy over here. So first thing, I want to get straight into it. What's your kind of origin story? I know we talked about it a little before we got on here, but what is it?
It's a little of my background.
Yeah.
Okay.
Background.
Sure. So after I graduated and married my wife, I got into sales. During college days, I worked as a guy in a grocery store and started grocery store management right out of college and realized I don't want that. And so I like people, and I thought sales would be good, and I got hired by Gallo Wine. That was my first sales job for a year. Had a friend in the printing industry, and I interviewed, got hired by a company called More Business Forums. Worked there for 3 years, sold printing, that's ink on paper. And then I got hired by a local printing guy called Image Printing. And I was fortunate. Landed a large hospital system called St. Joe's Health System in California. I was living in California. And they were my client for almost 20 years. And so hospitals print a lot. And it was before digital. Okay. And so even the charts were paper at that time. And so did a lot with that. And also in my background, I became a Christian when I was 30. And my wife and I, right in the middle of that career with our family, left for England and served as missionaries for 2 years, helped plant a church in England.
How was that? Was it like more of like a door-to-door type of thing where you went and talked to people, or did you plan the missionary? Is that what you said for the? Yeah,
we helped a pastor go to England to plant a church. You said door-to-door. I did a lot of that.
Really?
Yeah, and just talked about Jesus and encouraged people to come know the Lord. And we helped the church for about a year and a half on the ground. I was out of selling for about 2 years, though. Went to a mission school and all that. Came back, went right back into sales and the printing industry. Joined a church in California, and then when I was 46, I was asked to come on staff as one of the pastors of that church, which I did. I'm now 63, just to kind of give you a time span. Yeah. And served as a pastor there for 16 years. And then 2 years ago, our daughter moved here 6 years ago, Emily, and her husband, Sam. And Sam works for Toyota. But Emily, after her second child, developed what's called an autoimmune disorder, and she became very ill in 2020. And that was kind of the COVID era. Yeah. And my church, I was the pastor of the church, was coming out of the COVID. We had opened back up. The church was doing well. And my wife and I saw that there was a kind of a crisis here in Texas with our daughter. And so we decided that it would probably be best if we were here to help. And so I stepped down as the senior pastor of the church. And by the way, as a pastor, you have very little time. You're always busy, a lot of times at night, always on weekends. And so the only hobby I had really was roasting coffee. And I bought a little home roaster. Somebody in my congregation gave me some home roasted coffee, and I just was like, wow, that is so good. Because I was buying store-bought stuff like Starbucks or Pete's or whatever. It was okay. But when I had fresh, roasted, good quality coffee, it was head and shoulders above. And so I bought a home little roaster, and I started roasting my own and started learning what roasting coffee was. And so that was my hobby. And then when we moved here to Texas, one thing when you've been a missionary, I kind of look at Texas as a mission field for me, honestly.
A what?
A mission field. So it's meeting people, but I meet people because I want them to know Christ. And so in my neighborhood, I was just praying and saying, Lord, I guess I'm a missionary in Texas. What does that do? Paul had a tent ministry. He made tents and met people. Maybe I can do the only thing I know how to do other than preach the gospel and run churches. I'll go ahead and roast coffee. And so I bought a professional roasting machine, set it up in my garage. I have a 3-car garage. And I started roasting coffee. And then it just took off.
Yeah. You said that when you first came, like before we got on, you said you first came down here and thought you were just going to like hand them out like around the neighborhood. Yeah. And then can you kind of tell us like how instead of doing that, did you start out with that? Or I know you said that was your idea, but did you start out with that?
Yeah, in my mind, I was thinking a little teeny boutique thing that I literally would be almost like a milkman, just in my neighborhood. I live in a lot. The neighborhoods in Texas are huge.
Yeah.
So I live in one called Trinity Falls, and right now they've got almost 2,000 homes. I think they're planning up to 5,000 homes. And so I'm thinking, gosh, if I only had 100 of those homes that bought coffee from me, that's pretty good for a little guy.
Yeah.
And so I started meeting people. I started advertising. I have a little Facebook page for Trinity Falls, and people started buying from me. But I started business September 1st, 2021. And then in October, my daughter and I did our first kind of like farmer's market. It was a little pumpkin patch. And we did this local pumpkin patch. My daughter posted something on Facebook, and I didn't know this, but my wife's niece through marriage is an influencer. Her name is Lauren McBride. And she and her husband ordered some of my coffee, and they loved it. And then Lauren did a post on November 18th. The reason I know that date is my wife and I were walking in the Arboretum, and I sell my coffee over a platform called Shopify, and I have an app for that, and it's just started blowing up, and I'm like, what is going on? And I literally was getting an order about every 5 seconds, and that day I got 231 orders. Within 2 weeks, I had over 1,000 orders. That month, I sold over $18,000 in coffee. And I went from just a little guy that had just a few customers to more customers than I could handle at the moment. But it really, at that moment, it made me realize, social media is the way to go. And I also said, Lord, this is something that you've blessed far beyond. And I view all of life, and particularly business, as a stewardship, not just a business. And so I'm stewarding something that God has given me, and I want to do a really good job. That means I treat my customers well. That means the quality of the product has always got to be the best that I can find. And so I just try to do the best that I can do so that it honors God in every way, but also honors the people that want to buy my coffee. And since then, it's just been, it's just taken off.
Yeah, that's a crazy. You said you were in the Arboretum, and you're just like, you look down. I can imagine even the dopamine just going off in your brain. It must have been like just dopamine hit after dopamine hit, just sitting over there like, whoa.
Yeah. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of orders.
Oh my God.
That I didn't have enough coffee. I didn't have enough bags to put it in.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me weeks to, if you want to call it, dig out of that hole.
Yeah.
But what I did find is the kind of coffee that I sell, you might call it boutique or premium, or scratch coffee, however you want to call it. It's single origin. That means it comes from a location. It's small farm. Most coffee, particularly anything you're going to get in the store, is typically large plantation. Oftentimes lower quality. Mine is high quality, small farm. Typically it's sold through co-ops. And so it's the best of the best coffee. And then if you roast it right, and then it's always fresh. I roast to order, so if I get an order today, I typically either roast it tomorrow or I had just roasted it the day before. And so people are getting my coffee within 2 to 3 days, if I'm shipping it to them, of roasting. Most coffee within a grocery store is 2 to 3 months old. Coffee only has a shelf life of about 3 to 4 weeks before it's considered stale. Everything on the grocery shelf is considered stale. And there's a big shift in flavor in coffee.
Yeah.
But when you get really fresh coffee, oh my gosh, it is so rich and it's full of flavor, and you don't need to put the stuff in it because it just tastes good the way it is. And so what I find with me is when somebody gets my coffee, the most common response is, oh my gosh, that is amazing coffee.
Yeah.
Just because the beans are high quality, but also it's super fresh. And so I'm finding what most people don't realize is that the coffee they're used to is already stale, so it doesn't taste good. It's usually lower quality coffee because it's large plantation. But the quality that I sell is high quality and it's always fresh. And that difference is huge.
All right, so I have one question that keeps ringing off in my head. Are you the type of guy that wants the dark coffee? Like, because you said the flavor from your coffee is just amazing. You don't need to put anything in it. Are you like, hey, black coffee, or do you like your coffee with like milk, sugar, everything like that?
I like it all.
Yeah, you like it all, everything.
It depends on how you prepare it. Like most of the time I drink my coffee as what's called a pour over, which is kind of like in a cone, and you just use hot water, and I drink it black. So most mornings I'll have it that way, but sometimes I like an espresso. I like a cappuccino.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like to do a French press, which is a little richer, and sometimes with that I like just a little milk in it. And it really depends. I'm like a purist. Some people say, I only drink it black. You know what? Coffee, if you like it, drink it the way you like it.
Yeah.
But the difference is if it's really good coffee, that coffee drink, however you like it, man, it'll make it so much better. And I've just found that, I also sell mine. I can grind it for people beforehand, or I can sell it whole bean. About half my customers like to have it pre-ground before they get it. The other half like it whole bean. And so whichever way, I think it stores better whole bean.
Okay.
It just lasts longer. So it's better for the quality of the coffee. But however people like it,
So what is that? What is that process? Is it like have an air escape from it so it becomes more stale, or how does that? Is it like encompassing like the flavor or something? Like how? Why is?
So here's my bag.
Okay.
So it's called Papa Rob's Coffee.
Yeah.
And there's a valve that you really can't see it, but it's right here.
Okay.
And it's a one-way valve.
Okay.
And so coffee, when it's roasted in the roasting process,
Mm-hmm.
once it's done, the coffee beans begin to emit or expel CO2, carbon dioxide. And the CO2 is expelled through the bag. And so, honestly, fresh coffee, I usually like to wait about 3 to 4 days before I actually grind it and drink it, because it's still expelling the CO2. But it's almost like a fine wine. A good coffee is it's kind of like a fine wine. So when you roast coffee, the beans themselves begin to expel CO2. And so every bag has a valve on it, and it's a one-way valve. It allows the CO2 to escape from the bag. And coffee just gets better. And there's a shelf life of fresh coffee of about 30 days. And so, but I think the sweet spot is like 1 week to 3 weeks. It just gets better and better, and the flavors just kind of all gel together, and it's just excellent. So, yeah, fresh roasted coffee is amazing.
Okay. So like even with this bag, it's got I can even show a little bit. We got the little spot right there, the valve right there at the top. When was this roasted?
It says right on the bag there. So
it says it right on the bag.
Today's the 9th. That was roasted 3 days ago, 6/6.
You said that usually they stop putting the roast date on the actual coffee in the stores.
Yeah. So it used to be if you went into a store, you could pick up a can of coffee or a bag of coffee, look in there at the actual date that they roasted it. And typically, when you do that, you'd find that it had already been sitting on the shelf for 2 months. Most coffee on a grocery shelf is anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 to 4 months old. Yeah. And the pods are worst. So your K-cups and all that stuff is old, way stale. Coffee really is only considered fresh for about 30 days. After that, the process of it going stale, it happens. Just like you open a bag of chips and it starts to get stale. The same thing with it's a fresh product, it's food. And so it's going to go stale. So if you want to really get the really good flavors of coffee, it has to be fresh. And what happens when people buy my coffee, one, it's small batch, local, high quality beans, roasted the way the beans should be roasted. That means not over roasted, not under roasted, not burnt like a Starbucks. You're going to have a high quality coffee, but also the freshness makes all the difference. And so when you have really good beans with a good roast and freshness, it's at the premium of what coffee is supposed to taste like. So my coffee, it's not bitter.
Yeah.
Like you could just drink it black.
It's not bitter?
Not bitter at all. Even my dark roasts aren't bitter.
So what is the taste of more? Because I haven't even had like really fresh coffee before. Because I mean, all my coffee's stale apparently.
I brought you the Vietnam.
Yeah.
I brought you the Vietnam. So you're gonna be surprised because the Vietnam coffee, which surprised me when I got it, is it has a very rich kind of smoky. It has kind of a caramelly kind of those rich flavors of good coffee, but it's so smooth. And even though that's considered a dark roast, it is one of the smoothest coffees I carry. And so a lot of times you'll get a coffee and it's bitter, and the reason is because a lot of times it's old, and so the acidity of that has gone up, and oftentimes it's over roasted, and so basically they've burnt the beans, and so it's just they charred it. So much of coffee, it's just, the roasting process is bad, but also it's just old coffee, and so it's going to be bitter. It's going to be, you got to put a lot of sugar, a lot of cream to like it. But I'm telling you,
Starbucks, where they
yeah,
they gotta put a bunch of sugar, a bunch of cream in there.
But when you have good coffee, and it's been roasted right and it's fresh, it makes all the difference. It really does. That's what happened to me. Somebody gave me in my church. There was a guy who just had his own little roasting thing at home, and he brought me some coffee, and I tasted it, and I was amazed. And I thought, that's it. I'm buying myself a home roaster. I'm going to learn how to do this. And then when I came here, I decided, I'm going to actually do this as a business. And I'm grateful it's taken off. I mean, people like my coffee. I like my coffee. I drink it all the time. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the number, because we were talking a little bit before about sales and all that stuff, and how some people just don't even believe in what they're selling. How can you even do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, anybody, I guess when you buy anything from anybody, do they use their own product, or do they drink their own product?
Well, I only sell what I like. And so there are coffees that I've tried, that I've bought the beans and I've tested them out, and for whatever reason I didn't like the flavor of it, I won't sell it. I sell what I like. And by the way, customer service, like the customer, I'm grateful for people that buy my coffee. I mean, they don't have to. I mean, there's a zillion coffee people out there. But I'm finding that, at least here in Texas, I found people want to buy local. But also what I've just found is they're surprised when they get it, because it's good. And
it goes down smooth.
Yeah.
Because even for me, when I'll drink some coffee, I have a coffee big maker that we saw it with the touch screen and everything like that. But still, like, even that, I'll drink it sometimes, and I'll just be like, I don't know, it needs actual like creamer, everything like that. I'm really excited to try this for sure. Yeah, for sure. That brings me to my next point of like the Rob's coffee, the blend. What is the blend? Like, what's the full blend?
Well, when I blend coffees, I try to get a flavor profile, so it kind of depends on the coffee. So I do an espresso blend that I like to do it dark, and so I take 3 different locations, I put them together, and I come up with a special espresso blend that's kind of proprietary. And but I found that in an espresso machine, it has kind of those chocolatey, caramelly, nutty flavors that for a good espresso drink, man, out of this world. And so it took me a while to figure it out, but it's a good one. And so that's become one of my best sellers. And so I get a lot of people that like to have an espresso, and yeah.
So like, for other entrepreneurs out there that are listening to your story and kind of applying it to their own business, we talked about it a little bit further back, finding that right manufacturer. Could you tell us a little bit more about your manufacturer?
Yeah. Well, I'm the manufacturer of the coffee, but when it comes to the actual machine I bought, I found somebody that they're called Coffee Crafters. They actually make roasting machines, and they actually made it for the market of who I am. I went from a home roaster to a professional roaster, and the people in that company, they decided to target people like me, and they figured out a way to design a machine that you could actually install in your garage and that kind of thing. But it's a very high-end professional machine, and it's also, the price point wasn't as expensive as maybe some other types of machines. And so for one, that sold me, but the quality, after I got the machine, I was really impressed with the quality of the coffee that came out of it. Then I had to figure out, well, where do I get bags, and where do I get the green coffee beans, and just a lot of those things you don't think about. And so I actually started there. I asked them. I said, where would you guys recommend? And they had some recommendations, and through some of their recommendations, I contacted people, and it usually was more than one. And then I contacted other coffee people. So what are you guys doing? And just figuring it out.
In a coffee group chat?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And just trying to figure that stuff out, and I found a really good supplier who kind of travels the world, and talked to him a number of weeks ago. He was in Guatemala, and he buys small farm, and they're typically sold in what's called a co-op, and so it's helping these small farmers. But the coffee's A1 quality, and I literally buy the large bags from him. So basically, they're bagged in the co-op, and it basically passes through him to me, And then I do that. But he's been an excellent source of just good quality coffee. And so part of any business, you got to find, whatever you need or whatever you're putting together, you got to find the right suppliers. And so I'm at the stage now that I've figured that part out. So fortunately, I found somebody good who can actually print the bags and good quality bags, and good supplier for my coffee. And yeah.
That's what I kind of meant before, not manufacturer, like supplier. But like even getting past that, like getting to that point in that mastery level. I always find that when you get to that mastery level, then it's like you're looking at it different. So instead of, you get to a point where you are a master and you're like, oh, I kind of know more, but not really, because I'm still looking. I have a master's perspective on everything. So that's kind of what you were saying a little bit, and you were able to look and find better
I think I'm still
spots.
developing as a roaster. Yeah. I'm learning that, and also you learn, different types of beans. Have different flavor profiles depending on how you roast it, and so I'm still learning some of that, and I like to play around. I think it's fun. Yeah.
You found more things to explore.
Yeah, and so sometimes I'll take, and sometimes like a certain type of bean, like I roast this Vietnamese, I roast it dark. I tried it as a light roast and also medium. I didn't like it as well, but when I went to dark, I was like, wow, that's good. Yeah. And so I play around with them too. I've got one. From Rwanda, which is an African country, and their roast as a light roast is excellent, but I also like it as a dark roast, so I do them both. And so you can also find things like that. So I play around with it, try to figure it out, and I sometimes also do different blends. I'll try different beans together and see if I can get certain flavor profiles from the coffee. To me, it's fun, and if I find one that works, then maybe I'll bag it up and sell it as something. I don't know. I've found two that I'm doing right now. I partner with Roy Ponder. He's POW on Weather, and so he's the local weather guy here in McKinney, and he and I have partnered, and I do two blends for him. I call them POW Time. I do a smooth and I do a bold, and I blend different coffees together to get a certain flavor, and they're breakfast blends. So yeah.
What is a breakfast blend? Because I know I've heard it multiple times. What does that really mean? It's just kind of like a word.
I think you kind of have your standard coffees, like so it's not going to be too dark or too heavy. Your typical Folgers and all that. But now when you're using good quality coffee and you want a good kind of medium-bodied coffee, they call them a breakfast blend. So basically, it's a blend of different beans that makes a good coffee to drink in the morning. Okay. Yeah, and so I've done a couple different breakfast blends for Roy. One is a smooth. I do it as a medium roast, and then another one as more of your bolder people who like a dark roast.
This is kind of random, but I'm thinking to myself, like, when do you think the best time to drink coffee is? Because I've heard if you drink coffee straight in the morning, you'll kind of have a crash. I know you're the coffee guy, so I don't know if that's like a good question for you. When do you drink your coffee?
And everybody's different. Some people struggle with caffeine. Me, I drink it first thing in the morning. Okay. So I like it with a meal. I don't like to drink coffee just by itself. I always have a meal with my coffee. But usually I'm up usually between 5 and 6, depending on what the day is. So by 5:30, most mornings I'm having a cup of coffee.
Why do you wake up so early?
It's years of being in. Did a lot of ministry, a lot of work, a lot of business, so I was always up early. If I'm not if I work out, I get up, work out, and then I'll have a cup of coffee. Yeah. But yeah, I always like a coffee in the morning. Sometimes I'll have it in the afternoon, but for me, caffeine affects me after 3 o'clock. So usually I won't have anything after 3.
What type of workouts do you do in the morning?
We were talking about boxing earlier.
Yeah.
So I like to box. So I have a bag, and I found a guy on YouTube, so I follow him. But I used to work out with a trainer for over 15 years in boxing. Before that, I was a martial artist for a long time. And so I like that kind of a dynamic workout the most. My daughter recently turned me on to kind of a weight workout. And so I'm trying to incorporate some weights on the off days. But to me, it's boring.